Welcome back. Today's episode is all about Graham Nash, the legendary Graham Nash.
We're so excited because during the years of the Oral History Project, we have had the opportunity to interview him twice, and today we're going to feature both of those interviews.
So let's go over some of his statistics and see how well Dan and Mike here know the life and career of Graham Nash. So we know we were discussing earlier, right before we turned the tape on, about how he is a 2-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. So who wants to tell us what bands?
Crosby, Stills, Nash, and the Hollies.
Okay, so Dan gets a point. Ding, ding. Any guesses on the years on those two? Crosby, Stills, and Nash. What's your guess? What year were they inducted?
I'll take a guess. 2005.
Ooh.
I'm going to say before that, late 90s is my guess.
You know, surprise, surprise, Dan's the closest. It's 1997.
Wow, that's pretty early.
Yeah. And the Hollies, this one...
I think I know this one. I don't know why, but I think it was 2010.
Yes, so 2010 for the Hollies. And some other interesting facts about Graham Nash. He was brought in, I don't know what the correct term is, as an officer of the Order of the British Empire in 2010.
Is that the same as being knighted?
I tried to read a little bit about it, and I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to go out on a limb either way, but it looks like it. It's for his charity work and musical influence over the years. So Queen Elizabeth, did the ceremony.
That's fantastic.
So I wonder if his title is Sir Graham Nash.
Yeah,
that's
I
what
don't
I'm
know.
wondering.
In our third interview, that should be what we ask him.
Yeah.
So,
good point. Let's do that.
Yeah, something else I found interesting about him, he holds 4 honorary doctoral degrees.
Wow.
So one, I only got 3 universities, but one from the New York Institute of Technology, one from the University of Salford, sorry if I mispronounced that, and one from Lesley University out in Cambridge. So smart guy. People love him, clearly.
Well, what's amazing is that he keeps reinventing himself as not only a songwriter and a musician, also a vocalist and an author. He came out with his autobiography not long ago. He has taken photographs throughout his career, which now are often in exhibits and galleries around, including one at the Museum of Making Music in Carlsbad, April 2017. So an amazing talent for sure. And what we have learned firsthand, all 3 of us, is what an amazing guy. He really takes the time to connect with people, even if he only has a few short minutes with you. He really does connect, and I found him to be an extraordinary human being. So I'm very honored that we have a couple of interviews in our archives.
Yeah, and so the first one that we're going to listen to was recorded at the NAMM show, which takes place in Anaheim every January, and it was recorded on January 21st of 2016, so fairly recently. It's not super long in content because Graham didn't have a ton of time to spend with Dan, but it's good. It's got a lot of really good stuff, interesting stories. He's a very captivating individual.
So let's jump right into that first interview.
What a pleasure. Thanks for hanging out.
You're welcome, Dan.
Appreciate it. So the first thing I got to ask is, it's a big deal for us, is the Music for Life Awards, and I would love to hear your thoughts about getting that.
I never got into music to win awards. I got into music to meet women. Let's get real. But having said that, the older I get, the more I think that people want to give back, pay back, whatever. Every time I'm stopped on the street, I get this incredibly warm feeling from people. It's almost like they know me, but I don't know them, of course, but they know me through my music and through our music. What an incredibly lucky man I am. Here I am, I'm almost 74. That's why I can call Brian Bell kid, as you pointed out. And I live in a country that I think is one of the best countries on earth. It certainly does have its problems, as we've talked about, but there are many wonderful things that go on in this country. I'm very grateful to be here because I can speak. No one has to listen, but I have a small voice, and I'll use it to try and make the world better for me and my family and my friends and everybody else.
Fantastic. That's great. In your book, you talked a little bit about seeing the Stratocaster for the first time. I wonder if you could tell us that story.
Me and Alan Clark, who later formed the Hollies, had been singing together for many years, of course. I've known Alan since I was 6 years old. We were playing a show in Manchester at the Bodega, which was like a lunchtime beatnik kind of coffee club. And me and Alan Clark, with our 2 acoustic guitars, would play a few songs. A guy comes up to me and he goes, "You know what? You guys are really good, but you need bocking." I do? Bocking? What do you mean, bocking? What is that? He goes, no, you need Pete bocking. I said, okay, why would I want Pete bocking? He said, because he can play every solo you love. Every solo from every Buddy Holly song, from Gene Vincent song, from Elvis, from everything. He can play it. I said, really? He goes, yeah. And I said, okay, let's meet Pete Bocking. So we go to this kid's house, and he had a oblong box. I kind of was feeling, oh my God, I know what the shape of this guitar case is. Clicked it open, opened it, and there was the first Fender Stratocaster, a sunburst, beautiful Fender. That was probably 1960, 59, 60. So that was the first Stratocaster I ever saw, and I've been in love with them ever since.
I love that story because it really is echoed in so many other interviews that we have in our collection of people who see an instrument for the first time and really feel like their life has changed. And I know that sounds a little silly, but certainly very clear in Graham's story there. Also, it's kind of fun to think about the fact that the Stratocaster was only about 9 or 10 years old, so it was still very, very new, certainly in England, where it took a little bit longer to get over. Remember, he was born in Blackpool, so I don't believe they actually had a dealer in that area of England, Fender, until the late 1950s. So very interesting discovery.
And for those of us who aren't musicians and maybe just really enjoy listening to music, what's so iconic about the Stratocaster?
Well, it's a very recognizable guitar. One of the earlier electric guitars to come out, and it was played by so many important musicians in the past. Like he was talking about Buddy Holly and all the guys like that. It was just, and it still is, an iconic guitar that everybody seems to want to have.
It seems to me like it's the most recognizable guitar shape next to an acoustic guitar. And it was the very first sort of mass-produced, if you will, manufactured solid body. Many dealers, early retailers of the electric guitar often said that when the salesman would come, they'd say, "What's that plank of wood you're trying to sell us?" They weren't used to this thing. It doesn't resonate. Wait a minute, it doesn't have a hollow chamber, and it wasn't constructed with a hole in it where the sound vibrates. It's completely different. It uses these pickups and requires an amplifier to be heard. And that was a whole new concept for an awful lot of new people. And as Mike pointed out, when people in England in particular were hearing American music for the first time on broadcasts such as Buddy Holly, it was a huge influence on them. And Buddy Holly really kind of goes down in history as a major influence in many of the British invasion participants because he was playing instruments that they had never seen before, namely the Strat.
Awesome. Let's hear more from Graham. I think next he's going to talk about, where one would go to get such an amazing guitar.
So do you remember getting your own first?
I do. Right now it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have an exhibit of Graham Nash, of my stuff. And my early Strat is in there. I think it's 2091, the number of the Strat. So it's pretty early. But it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
How did you get it?
Money.
I mean, was that a music store? Or?
Oh, yeah. Music store. I was on the road somewhere in Burning Blankets, Arizona, wherever the hell it was. And I went into this pawn shop, and there was this beautiful old Fender, so I bought it. That was so many years ago, though.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
I often wonder where Buddy's Fender is. It was stolen, and I wonder where it is.
Well, with a number, he must have had a small number too. You'd think that would be traceable somehow.
Yeah, and I think he got it from Manny's music store in New York City. We're all musicians, we all need to buy instruments.
Well, speaking of Manny's, do you have any stories about visiting music stores?
Only that it went from the first time I ever really remember looking in a music store in Manchester, which is where I was from. There were strange things in there, strange bazookas and strange ocarinas and strange harmonicas. And then one day, an electric guitar was in the window. I can't tell you how many hours I spent in that window with my nose pressed up against the glass, hoping one day I could ever afford a guitar like this. And now look at it. You go to NAMM here. Every single thing concerned with music, you can find it here. And they're an incredible link in the communication chain between a musician and our audience. If we didn't have all those music merchandisers, to help translate our music into reality for the people out there, our job would be much more difficult. They're very, very important. These mom and pop stores, as they're called, are called that for a very good reason. They're the mother and father of the business.
What a great commercial for NAMM as well, which is a good opportunity for us to say a little piece that this entire collection of interviews is based really on the desire of our membership, the NAMM membership over the years, to want to archive their own history, the history of the music products industry. And as a result, we have collected over 3,000 interviews of, as Graham called them, mom and pop shops and people who have engineered and luthiers and folks who have come up with musical products and sold them, salesmen, sales reps, as well as wholesalers. I mean, the whole gamut. Music publishers, composers, and that huge history has all been funneled into these interviews, which we're very blessed to share portions with you as part of this podcast.
And I think it's wonderful that Graham makes a point to recognize mom and pop music shops. One, I think in this day and age, that sense of small independent retailers, whether it's in the music industry or any facet of the economy, is going away in favor of online marketplace or large national chains. And then on top of that, when he mentions, when musicians get big, I think they tend to lose connect with that. And he makes sure to recognize them, these small independent retailers, for making it possible, because everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah, and the mom and pop stores really are the place where young kids are introduced to music for the first time. And a lot of these retailers from the independent stores will make sure that kid is given the right gear. He's taking lessons, and he really gets into music, and it's a great place for anyone to really get into music, and it's great to see that Graham's talking about that.
So before we move on to our next segment, I wanted to say that we kind of going out of sequence in his career, but not to panic. There's a second interview that we're going to be playing a little bit later on that talks about some of the things. Namely, we're skipping right to Neil Young, I believe, in this next segment, and we didn't talk at all about his songwriting and the Hollies, but I know that'll be covered later. So no one panic out there. So tell me about Deja Vu.
The album or what?
The album. How did that come about?
It came about because we had a lot of music to play. We were writing crazily, every day, and we had a lot of music, and we had made the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record, and that was, quite successful. And I, quite frankly, I wasn't sure whether we needed Neil in the band. I'll be honest. I'd never met him. I didn't know him. I didn't know if I could be his friend, if I could tell him secrets. I didn't know Neil. And before we were going to invite him into the band, I said to David and Stephen, I said, you know him. You know what he's like. I've never met him. Before we invite him into CSN, I've got to meet this guy. Come on. And so that they obviously understood that. And I went to breakfast on Bleecker Street with Neil Young and was incredibly impressed with him as a person. He was very confident. He was very self-assured. He had this dark sense of humor. And I said to him at the end of the conversation, at the end of breakfast, I said, so tell me, why should we invite you into this band? And he looked at me and he said, you ever heard me and Stephen play guitar together, man? I said, yeah. He said, that's why you need me.
That's an answer. And it fit?
Of course it fit. It's very interesting being in, almost 4 bands at the same time. I'm a solo artist, and I'm an artist with David, and we have our band, and I'm an artist with David and Stephen, and we have that band, and then I am an artist with David and Stephen and Neil, and we have that band. It's like, I'm insanely lucky, man. I get to express myself all day. It's very important to me.
I wish I had that kind of confidence about anything in my life. Have you heard me play guitar? Oh, that's why you let me in.
I suppose if you did, then you'd be in CSN as well.
I'd be a multimillionaire 2-time Rock and Roll Fame Hall inductee. Yeah, I guess.
Well, it's neat also. I mean, the confidence is one thing, but also the expression of how he felt, Neil, about playing with somebody else, and knowing that connected so well that Graham would automatically recognize that. And I think that's a fantastic element of that band. That is why we keep talking about it all these years later.
So going on to the next segment, Graham is going to talk about the importance of music in schools in his own personal life, which I think is something that we're struggling with, and our public education system is constantly struggling with keeping music in schools, and so it'll be a refreshing take.
And of course, NAMM plays a big role in advocating for music education, so this was a particular important question to address to him. Another aspect of what NAMM is trying to do to encourage people to become music makers is just that accessibility of it, as far as being a way of expression. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what music means to you and how it helps you express yourself.
I think it's been proven by many scientists that if music is in a school program, that kids are less likely to beat each other up or join a gang or turn nasty, or if music is in their lives and they get into music, they get better grades, they think better about themselves, they have better friends, they don't bully, they don't join gangs. It's obvious. The sad thing is that in a country like America, it's very obvious that the first program to go in any school budget cut is the music and the arts programs. They never cut the football or the sports programs. They cut the music, and I think it's a big mistake.
Said. So how would you describe what music means to you?
It's my life. I don't know, I often think, what would have happened to me if I hadn't become a musician? And I'd probably be in some insane asylum, wrapped up in a sheet somewhere in a corner. Music saved my life. And I'm constantly aware of that, and I'm constantly in a frame of mind to pay back, to give back to what music has given me in my life. That's why, I support the programs that put musical instruments into the hands of kids. I was just given a humanitarian award from Little Kids Rock in New York, where they put thousands of instruments into the hands of kids that don't have the ability to get their hands on an instrument. They're changing people's lives. They're changing kids' lives by the second. Very, very important. So I will continue to support people that put instruments into the hands of children.
Well said. And you've been doing that for a long time, I should point out. Yeah, absolutely.
What can you do? Got to give back.
A very important element of his career is his songwriting, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But I think it's important to bring it up as we introduce this next segment regarding the Everly Brothers. One part that wasn't noted in this next discussion that I think is very important is Graham in the mid-'60s really started focusing on themes that he saw around him as part of his songwriting, and not just I'm in love with a girl, but political statements with the civil rights movement, of course, going on at that time, the Vietnam War, some other things that were very important to him, of course, came out quite clearly in Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But even earlier than that, he was writing some songs for the Hollies that had political themes, one of which was a tune called Signs That Will Never Change, that was first recorded by the Everly Brothers. And he talks a little bit about his relationship with the Everly Brothers coming up next.
1960, the Everly Brothers came to Manchester to play a show. Me and Alan Clark decided that we're going to meet them. And we decide that because there's no tour bus there and that the nearest best hotel was only 100 feet away, that they're probably staying there. So we went and stood on the steps of the Midland Hotel in Manchester and waited for him to come home, and they did. And what happened in that particular meeting was very important to me. My heroes were calling me by my name. They were recognizing me as a person. It wasn't good kid saying, no, they stood and talked to me and Alan Clark for 20 minutes. It was incredibly important to me at that point in my life. And it changed my life because I realized that if you have somebody that's a hero or that you look up to, if they're a dick, it ruins your day. But if the people that you admire are decent people, it enriches your life. And then you get to be a person that recognizes that we all need help, because this is an incredibly crazy world and an incredibly difficult life to live. We need all the help we can get. And the Everly Brothers taught me that. Direct contact, a little eye contact, and we've met each other. You're Dan, I'm Graham. We'll move on with our life, but at least we said hello to each other.
Yeah, there's nothing more disappointing in life than meeting someone face-to-face for the first time that you've looked up to or admired, and then they come off as a jerk, and then it just crushes your whole world almost.
Right. And it's cool to see someone that is a hero to many people say something like that. Say that it meant a lot for him to meet his heroes. So now when he meets his fans, he treats them with respect and really does it right.
Right. Really creates some perception, then when he's going out there and, whether it's walking down the street or he's at an event, and to really be conscious and cognizant of that fact and make sure that you always put your best foot forward.
Absolutely.
So Dan, in the interview, Dan talks next about what are some of Graham's goals moving forward after beyond music. What else does he want to do in his life? What else does he want to achieve? And Dan mentioned earlier that he writes a book, which was released a few years ago, an autobiography, which from everything I've read online was a huge success and people were dying to get their hands on it. As well as he gets really heavily into photography, and the Museum of Making Music in Carlsbad, actually located right below us right now, hosted an exhibit of his photography, and the three of us got to check it out, and it's amazing.
Yeah, for someone who's so well known for music, the photography was just amazing. It was professional.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a talented guy.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. I often thought content for photography has almost everything to do with it. And I no longer think that. Now, yes, of course, taking a picture of Neil Young backstage, that's going to be a great picture even if I took it. But the lighting and the shadows and the understanding of light that he clearly has made a lot of those images to me just really pop.
Yeah, and there's one downstairs that stuck out to me, and it's a portrait of Johnny Cash and the way that he shadows his face and everything. It's not just, oh my gosh, it's a picture of Johnny Cash. It's, oh my gosh, it's a picture of Johnny Cash. Look at the feeling behind it. Like, you kind of get a whole bunch of emotion, and you get this, I don't know, I got the vibe of like the tortured spirit that was supposedly Johnny towards the end of his life.
And we're going to hear Graham talk about this next, but he does say that even when he's not doing something related to music, when he's not performing or writing or anything like that, he still needs to be creative, and he still needs to express himself. And he'll go on to say about how no matter what that is, whether it's photography or drawing or music, he just always needs to express himself.
Yeah, and he's been recognized just to plug a couple of his honors for photography. He's gotten a New York Institute of Technology's Art and Technology Medal and an honorary doctorate of human letters and the Hollywood Film Festival's inaugural Hollywood Visionary Cyber Award. That was a mouthful.
It's pretty impressive.
But good for him. I don't know what most of it means, but
if the names mean anything,
it's impressive.
Then it's pretty impressive.
It's impressive.
Is there something in music that you haven't done that you'd like to do?
Wow. I'm sorry for the 20-second gap. I'm not sure that there is anything I'd like to do. My only thing that I want to do is keep creating. I have to create every day, or else I'm not very happy. I'm quite hard on myself. I'm my own worst critic, I think. But I have to create every day, or else I can't sleep.
And so creating to you is writing, playing?
Everything. If you see, I don't think I'll ever get what they call writer's block, because if I'm not writing, and if it's not coming, then I'll pick up my camera, or I'll pick up my hammer and chisels and attack a piece of marble, or I will go and find a great photograph to buy, or take a decent photograph. I have many forms of expression in my life, and I'm a lucky man because I get to use all of them. How lucky is that? Seriously. I'm still waiting to get found out.
Strangely enough, that's exactly how I feel.
Yep.
Yeah. That's
what are we doing here? Right. Supposed to be down the mine or working at the mill.
Exactly. And if you say it too loud, somebody's going
to listen and go, "Excuse me."
Over here.
I definitely feel like after that clip that you can safely say that Graham Nash is probably not one to take naps and binge watch TV.